I can come back again.
All right, good evening, everybody. It's good to see so many of you. I would first of all like to welcome our guest speaker tonight, Dr. Wiesel. Before we begin, please do make sure that you are muting your microphone. Questions are encouraged during this session. If you would be so kind and ask your questions using the messenger app that's on here, the group chat. We will see that and get your question answered. Please keep in mind that Florian does not know our internal procedures. He is speaking about the virus in general. So any questions you have along the discussion, please feel free to do so. At the end, we will have a quick Q&A. We got a few questions from you guys that we want to address at the end. And with that, I would like to welcome Florian. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So we are all excited to hear on what the virus does and how the immune system is responding and how we are looking on possible vaccines.
Yeah, hello, everybody. It's nice being here. So I met Thilo a couple of weeks ago at our German club Teutonia, and he asked me whether I would be interested in talking a little bit about this bad disease. So, and I want to focus on a lot of questions people have. And maybe the biggest question everybody right at the moment has is about this testing, right? Is this really true that we have so many cases because of doing more testing? Or do we actually have really more infections? And where does this all come from? All right. So it is true. So there is no straight answer to this. And it's a little bit politicized at the moment. So it is true that we do a lot of testing, and therefore we will find more cases than if we did less testing. Okay? So there is some truth to this. But it is not 100% of the answer, right? So we have an increasing number of cases, which we would also pick up if we did a lower amount of testing, because we always have to think about it's not the absolute number of tests, it's about the percentage of the population who gets tested, right? And there are a lot of concerns from a lot of people whether these tests are actually accurate. Okay? And sometimes you have a result which is false negative, right? So people go there, they get tested, and they show up negative, and then they get tested. So then they get sick, get tested again, and then they are positive. And a lot of people have lost faith in this testing, but let me explain this to you with a fish tank model, which I think is a really nice model to explain this. So at the beginning, if somebody gets exposed to this virus and the virus comes in our body, there is only very few viral particles, and it's almost impossible to detect it at the very beginning. So the virus comes in our body, and then it takes a few days until the virus gets into our cells and multiplies until we have a lot of virus in our body that we can actually transmit and that we get tested positive. Okay? So let's say we have a person who is either at the very beginning of the infection or at the very end when all of the virus is cleared. And then you take a swab from a small area of your body, which is usually the inside of the nose. And sometimes you catch enough virus with this swab that you get a positive test, and sometimes you don't. So let's think about this as a fish tank. So you have a tank in front of you with 1,000 fish. So you take a net and take a scoop. You can be pretty sure that you will catch a fish, so the test is positive. If you only have a few viruses in you, which in our model would be that the fish tank is almost empty, you can take a couple of scoops and don't catch a fish. So the test only sees what you have in your net. So in this case, when you don't catch a fish, you will get a negative result. In reality, you are positive. Okay? So this is what we call the threshold of detection. And we have better tests now, more sensitive tests. So the newer tests will pick up fewer numbers of viruses. So this is also an improvement in our detection limit. So this also leads to the fact that more people have a positive test. And overall, the numbers of this global infection go up almost or in most countries of the world. And the biggest problem with this is that you have a few people who don't take this serious enough, right? Or they under the impression that they are fine when they get it. Okay? So we have to be everybody, also the younger kids or the 20-year-old super sports athletic people. Nobody is safe from this virus, right? So we always have to keep this in mind. Usually the elderly people or people who have pre-existing conditions.
Okay, looks like we temporarily lost Florian here for a little minute. Okay, just bear with us here for a moment. So just you haven't gotten the note on who Florian is. Florian works for the University of Pittsburgh. He is very, very heavily involved in researching the virus and finding a vaccine. So he has multiple publications on immune systems. So I hope he is having luck signing up. He's still rotating here. Okay, so it is a fascinating topic. Hopefully he comes back here in a minute. I feel it was a good idea to address the situation because it's not just so that we are informed as we protect our coaches, players, referees, spectators. I also feel we as a group have a responsibility to do everything we can to not spread the virus. Florian, are you back?
Yeah, so for whatever reason, my computer just decided to crash.
Yeah, okay.
I
That
switched
is
my Wi-Fi.
good. All right, back to you.
I'm so sorry. Sorry for this. Yeah, so right. So a lot of people think, even my students, they think they're immune. And they are wrong. They are seriously wrong. Right? So you have to treat this disease with respect, and you have to protect yourself.
Oh, you scored on yourself.
Huh? What are you doing? Okay. And a lot of people don't do this, and this is why we are in this mess, right? So these big parties where a lot of people get together are a huge problem in spreading this disease. So when you look at the scientific data, it is actually very, very, very unlikely that you get infection from a surface, right? So less than 0.5% of all cases or less you can trace to the surface infection. So the virus itself has only a 2-hour half-life. So this means if the virus is at a surface, after 2 hours, you only find half of it. And after 2 hours, half of it. So the biggest rate of transmission of this virus is for sure the in-person extended contact. So a few viruses will not get a person with an intact immune system sick. You need a certain dose of this virus. And the dose of the virus is the problem. So if you are in a non-ventilated room and one person is sick, this person will shed virus, and the virus amount, concentration, will build up in this room until it reaches a concentration which becomes dangerous to infection. So this is one of the reasons when the governor said, okay, we only allow outdoor dining, or we can only allow a minimum number of people in any given indoor space, or at the very beginning, even no indoor dining to keep people as much apart as possible, right? So when I go to work, I have to use an elevator. And being in contact, so we all wear masks, and being in contact with the person I'm riding the elevator with, I'm really not much concerned about catching that virus, because in this 30 seconds I'm exposed to this person, I'm very likely not going to catch this virus. But being in an in-person meeting or over dinner indoors with an infected person, that increases my risk of infection. So as a golden rule of thumb is, if you can do it outdoor, do it outdoor, right? If you can avoid indoor spaces for a longer period of time, avoid them. And wearing a mask is a really good thing to do, even though there are a lot of people out there who think they do not have to do it. So this door swings in both directions. So wearing a regular mask primarily protects the people around you, okay? Because when you speak regularly, not screaming, not singing, not yelling, regular speaking, the little droplets may only go 2 feet, and then they drop to the ground. And these are the infectious particles. So if you wear a mask, you reduce this to essentially nothing. It's all caught in the inside of the mouth. So the CDC recommends a 6-foot distance, which is actually further than droplets can travel when they leave your mouth when you speak normally. There were a couple of reports about a lot of people getting sick at the very same time when they were in church singing, because singing, screaming, yelling, doing sports, having a higher heart rate, a higher rate of breathing, makes these particles travel 10 feet or more, right? And this is how the infection spreads a lot. So I would wear a mask whenever I go outside, and I cannot keep my physical distance to anybody around here of less than 6 feet.
Florian, I just got a question on this.
Yeah.
How is a face shield compared to a mask?
Yeah. So with a mask, you are fine. The infection of the virus happens through our mucous surfaces. Okay? So our inside surface is actually way bigger than our outside surface. So most of the infections happen if you catch the droplets with your mouth or you breathe them in with your nose. But if somebody coughs at you and the droplets hit your eyes, that is also a mucosal surface. So you can also get infection through your eyes. And that is what the face shield is for. So at the University of Pittsburgh, where I work, we will only wear masks while we are at work. And if we are forced to be closer than 6 feet to a person, because we do a training or whatever else, we will put on a face shield to essentially protect our eyes as an additional mucosal area. So for close proximity, it really helps. But if you want to reduce the number of virus you shed in case you are infected, a mask is totally fine. Okay? So, yeah. So I think, and we have seen this in experiments. So when a person, the air around a person is marked with traces, and you have this person breathe in and breathe out, you can actually see how far the breath goes, how far the droplets go, and how the air flows. And if you do this with a mask and without a mask, and you look at the data, it's 100% clear that wearing a mask is really beneficial, right? And so wearing a mask, for example, let's say you go to an outdoor dining. What is a really good way of doing it? So you enter if you have to go to the inside the building to get seated. So we would wear a mask to go into this restaurant, and then when they seat you and you are seated, you would take your mask off in an outdoor space. When the waiter comes and asks you, we would put the mask back on while we interact with this person. But while we're sitting on our table with this group, we take it off. You can leave it on, that's fine. But I think it's fine to take it off. And the second we leave our table, because you leave this place or you have to go to the restroom or go somewhere else while you're walking around through the aisles to the other tables, it's a really good idea to put it back on. Okay? So wearing masks is an essential way of beating this unfortunate pandemic. So for children are very, very less likely to suffer significantly from this disease than adults. So this is scientifically proven in many ways. And there are a couple of reasons for this. So COVID can lead to an overshooting immune response. Okay? So, and then you suffer from your own immunity because it's too strong. It generates a lot of issues in your body. Kids are less likely to do it. So most likely kids will actually be symptom-free or have the signs of a mild flu. But the problem with these little guys is that they still have the virus. So they can infect people around them. Actually more dangerous than others, right? Because they're running around all the time. They always touch their face. They touch everything. You can tell them, don't drink from my glass. They will do it. So, and this brings us kind of to this next question a lot of people have at the moment. And so is it okay to send your kids back to school, or is it not a good idea to do this? So we think about this all the time, and there is not really a good answer to this. So on the one hand, we have to balance and think about our daily life, the social consequences, the financial consequences, and our career consequences from this epidemic. So the school district of Pittsburgh just released last week of how they think they can do this in a safe way. So they came up with this, they call this AABD model. So they would split the kids in two groups. And the first group of children would go physically to school on Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday, there is nobody in the school because there's deep cleaning. And on Thursday and Friday, the second group of children would go in person to school. And on the 3 days the kids are not in school, they will get online education. And the parents actually have the choice, right? So the school district asks that every parent who does not want their children to go to school to sign this up, and then that is okay. So you do not have to send your kids to school if you do not want. So I decided that I will send my two children at the age of 8 and 10 back to school. But when you make this decision, you have to figure in a lot of variables, whether this is really what you want or not. So the schools will do everything to social distance the kids to the best they can. They will do all the disinfection and will comply with all the CDC regulations. So the kids are, I can't use the word safe because they are not, but they have minimal exposure. But if you live in a household with your children where you have a person who has problems, preconditions, elderly, immunosuppressed, and these children will inevitably interact with this person on a daily basis, then you might want to consider not to send your kids to school if they could harm a very sensitive person to this disease. So in my particular case, I do not have my parents living in this house, nor a very elderly person. And the university didn't shut down during the lockdown, so I'm at work every day anyway. So I decided I will do this. But this is up to the parents' decision. And I personally think the model Pittsburgh Public Schools uses by separating them into groups and having this cleaning day in the middle and making sure that only 50% of all the kids are in school at the same time. I don't know how you could make this a better way. So I think they did a reasonable choice by doing this. And I already heard that thousands of parents will not send their kids back to school. So what actually is going to happen if things stay the way they are, that it's not going to be that 50% of the children will be at school at any given time, because a significant amount of them will not show up. Yeah. So everybody has to make this decision for themselves. Another thing a lot of people ask me is, you know about this immunity passport? Shall I get my antibody titer? Does this work? What does it actually mean? So there are two different types of tests here. So the one is the so-called swab, right? So it tests for the virus. So what this test does, it measures the genetic information or the amount of genetic information of this virus in your body. So it will tell you, yes, you have the virus, or no, you do not have the virus. With a limitation, right? We only can detect so and so many viruses, so it can be that you show up negative even though you are positive, if you're at the very beginning or at the very end of the infection. But you can also get a second test. It's called the immunity test. So when this virus comes in our body, it will induce an immune response. And this immune response is very different from person to person. And we do not know exactly why a certain type of person is more susceptible to the other, why some people are essentially asymptomatic, and why other people suffer so much, even though they are in their prime age and physically ideal. So but what happens is the virus comes in our body, and we have an immune system. So our immune system is designed to destroy everything which comes in our body, which is not ourselves. Okay? But our immune system needs a little bit of time. It has many different branches of how our immune system protects our body. And we have the coolest immune system in the world, because our immune system can actually detect almost everything, even though we have never seen it before. So we are now dealing with a virus which just originated half a year ago. So the whole world has never seen it. But our immune system is actually capable, even though we have never seen it, to specifically attack it, destroy it, and make us healthy again. But this takes a couple of days. So the virus comes in our body, and then it will do a round of multiplication, meaning it infects our cells and makes a lot more virus inside the cell. Then the cell dies. The virus kills the cell, and the new viruses, virions, are released. And our immune system will see this. And latest research suggests that you need antibodies, right? So you have a certain type of cells in your body. They are called B cells. They are very small. You have 10 to the 9 of them, so a lot. And they're usually lazy. So they're everywhere in your body, and they don't do much. But when they see their so-called antigen, and in that case, that's the coronavirus, they will bind it, and then they will differentiate into a different cell. So these cells are usually pretty small, and then they swell in size, they get really big, and they turn into factories. And these cells will make antibodies against that virus. And a cell can make about 100,000 antibodies per second. And these antibodies will bind the virus and hopefully neutralize it. So neutralization means that this antibody, it's a small molecule which binds the virus in a certain way, and then this virus is cleared out of the body. And these antibody responses are tremendously powerful. And this will lead in my next topic, which is the vaccine development. And it seems that people who are really good in making these antibodies have a milder condition during the infection. And when you take a person who has never got in contact with COVID-19, you will not find antibodies against COVID-19, which is also not true. Because the problem is, this thing is called COVID-19 because there are 18 other viruses which look very much alike. Okay? So corona has similarity to SARS, but it's a coronavirus. And coronaviruses actually live in bats. And they are all very similar, but different enough that we call them a strain. And by the end of last year, this new coronavirus was found, and they just gave him the next number on the list, which was 19, because we already have 18 of these types of viruses. And they are similar. So let's say some point in your life you came in contact with a coronavirus because you were just sitting on your table and a bat flew over you and shit down on there, you touched it, you got it into your body, so you got in contact with a coronavirus, which does not infect humans. But your immune system doesn't really care. So your immune system suddenly found the coronavirus, eliminated it, and what our immune system does, it has a memory, which is the coolest feature of our immune system. So your immune system still remembers that you have seen this coronavirus a long time ago. And now you have COVID-19. So maybe a significant fraction of people actually have antibodies against this COVID-19 because elements in the COVID-19 virus are also present in COVID-18, COVID-17, COVID-16, and so on and so forth. This is something which we would call natural immunity. So you don't know that, right? Because whenever you got in contact with a bat, you didn't recognize this. You didn't get sick. You didn't get a fever. It just happened and you didn't know it. But you are in the lucky case that you have antibodies against COVID-19. So, and now when you get your antibody test, there are different types of tests. So there are tests out there which we call cross-reactive. So they take blood from a person and they test the blood for the antibodies in there, whether there are specific antibodies against COVID-19. And if you have specific antibodies, that means you have seen it and your immune system has reacted. And the first tests which came out were maybe not 100% perfect because they also picked up antibodies in our blood against these coronaviruses. which we might have contacted years ago. And these brand new tests, they are very specific for COVID-19 because we only measure the antibodies directed to the so-called spike protein, which is specific to COVID-19. So if you decide to get this test, they will take a little bit of blood from you and take the plasma of the blood, which contains the antibodies, and test whether there are antibodies in your blood specific to COVID-19. And if you have antibodies against this is really good because antibodies are tremendously powerful tool against this COVID-19. And with a vaccine, the idea is we put a non-infectious version of COVID-19 in our body. And our immune system doesn't really care whether it's infectious or not. So we would take COVID-19 and either boil it so that it is destroyed, or we can irradiate it with radioactivity to destroy it, or we destroy it with ultraviolet light so that the virus is non-infectious anymore. And then we get it injected in any form into our body, and our immune system will make an immune response. And it will generate, during this immune response, the cells which are specific for COVID-19. So our immune system actually works a little bit like an army, right? If you fought a person or somebody before, you know how this works, and you are much better prepared if you get it a second time. So our immune system makes these weapons. And now is the question, how long do these weapons last? And this is the big problem with the vaccine. So when you do a vaccine under regular circumstances, not against this global pandemic which we have now, it takes 10 plus years. Okay? You make a vaccine and you give it to people who sign up for the trial, and then you see whether these people actually respond to this vaccine and whether your vaccine is safe. So there were vaccine trials against other things where people got really sick. So we are now at the point where we got the first clinical study results back, and there are actually really promising vaccines on the market. So that all the people who got it developed these antibodies, and none of the people who got it got sick from something else. So this is super good. So this is best news as we can have them at the moment. So we are right on track with our vaccine research. The one big problem we have, and there is no way for us to figure this out. Under normal circumstances, you would take 10 years to immunize these people, and then you test them every couple of months over a long period of time, 5 years or longer. And you see, you measure whether the immunity these people generated actually lasts. Because you want a vaccine which protects you for years. But with this global pandemic and so many people suffering and dying, we just do not have the luxury to wait 5 years to make a vaccine. So these are unprecedented times, and the leading scientists, the CDC, the FDA, all these regulatory instruments, they will approve soon a vaccine. And then people can decide whether they want it or whether they do not want it. So what the vaccine will do, it will induce this immune response in you against COVID-19 without you getting sick, getting symptoms, being able to infect a person, because you will not have infectious virus when you get this injection, or it's likely an inhalation. And then it's gonna take 2 to 3 weeks. It's like when you get your flu shot. It's gonna take 2 to 3 weeks for your immune system to really build up all these antibodies that you are protected. So the second you get the vaccine and you leave the doctor's office, you're not protected, because your immune system takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to actually build up this immunity. So still be careful. But the factor which is maybe the most important about a vaccine is we cannot tell how long the immunity is going to last, because we just don't have the luxury to wait 5 years and find the vaccine candidate which makes the long-lasting immunity. And there's really almost no way for us to predict how long the immunity will last after we get the vaccine. So the best thing we can do now is maybe 5 months, 6 months out, look at the study results, and then the vaccine gets approved and we will get it. So I will get it because this is better than nothing and it doesn't hurt. And even though it only protects us, worst case scenario, 8 months, 10 months, worst case, it will slow the spread of COVID-19 tremendously down. Because what we always have to keep in mind is the ratio of infected to non-infected, right? So if you have a lot of infected people, these people will infect a lot of other people. So if one person infects one other person, our line is flat, right? There is no increase because one person does one person. If our number is double, so one person infects 2%, then our line is going straight up. So we have to bring the number below 1. So one person on average has to infect less than one other person. Then our curve goes down. And if we have a vaccine, it will actually prevent people who got vaccinated from being infected. So you have 10 people at a party and 5 of them got the vaccine. You can take these 5 people out of the equation because they will not get infected and they will not be able to infect others. And this is called herd immunity. You might have heard this term, right? Herd immunity is just a term that you need from a population. And in our sad case, that is the whole population of this planet. We need a certain amount of people who have immunity, that the virus cannot simply spread to every person. The transmission is blocked because a lot of people have immunity. They get the virus, don't get sick, don't spread it. And we are looking for herd immunity somewhere in the range of, it's hard to predict, somewhere between 30 and 40%. If we can reach this, the virus has no chance to be a global pandemic. So the sooner we get this vaccine, the better we are set up to end this pandemic. But we don't know how long our immunity lasts because we can't do the tests we needed to do, which we would do for every single other vaccine ever approved. But science doesn't stop, and research doesn't stop, and clinical trials do not stop the second a vaccine is approved on the market. So if it turns out that it's only a short-term protection, which goes away in 6 or 8 months, this gives the scientists and all the people who work day and night to make a vaccine 6 or 8 months more time to find a better vaccine or test their people 6 months longer out. And then we are maybe at 1.5 years protection. So worst case scenario for a regular person is we have a vaccine soon, you get it, the doctor tells you after 4 months, you know what, this vaccine is awesome, but only holds 6 to 8 months. So what we're going to do is you get another shot 6 months later. And then you build up new immunity. So there is no harm in getting it. So I would highly recommend, if it comes, that we get it. And all the numbers you see on these radio stations or TV channels or people who are not scientists and telling you, I am pretty sure we are going to have a vaccine in 4 months from now. It takes time to develop the vaccine, but let's say the CDC or the FDA approve a vaccine tomorrow, then we still have to make it. But just to give you an idea for the flu vaccine. So at the beginning of flu season, they start to produce the flu vaccine for the next year because it takes 9 months to make enough flu vaccine for the United States. So 9 months. to make it. And we only need a handful of flu vaccines compared to what we need in COVID vaccines. So the production capability, this is what we need now. So people work day and night to figure out how can we make a vaccine and how low can we go with the dose we give to a single person so that we are actually able to produce enough of it to give it to as many people as possible. And so the production can take months, depending which vaccine we are going to get and in which type you have to make it. So I'm going to have an extra beer the day one of our regulatory institutions gives the okay for a vaccine, because that is awesome. But then I will have a glass of water because I know it's going to take a while to produce it. Right? So look at it this way. Everything goes towards the right direction, but we have to make a lot of doses, right? So 7 billion doses. When you think of the United States, there's a lot of people in here, but this is only 5% of the world's population, right? And I work with one of our virologists on a different type of vaccine. And the problem we are running into is that some of these proteins on this coronavirus, so when you really make them and they are highly immunogenic, meaning that the immune system sees them and they make a ton of immune response, they are not so stable. So we have to find ways when we make this vaccine that it actually lasts for a certain amount of time until we are able to give it to all the people. And this is the third big challenge of a global vaccination. So first you have to develop the vaccine, you have to get approval for everything, it has to be safe, then you have to make it, which is, so 7 billion doses, you also need 7 billion needles, right? You need 7 billion times a medical professional to does the vaccination. When you look at all these lines which you have for testing stations, how can you imagine how this is going to look when these people can give you a vaccine? So the logistics behind this is a problem. But a lot of people work on this, and I'm pretty sure they are going to figure this out by the time we are going to get there. So I would look towards our future in a positive way if people right now today would be a little more cautious about this. So there will be a vaccine. There will be light at the end of the tunnel, which will give us a lot of our life quality back. But what I think a lot of people just do not understand is that the personal behavior in personal protection or protecting others actually has a huge impact also on our economic situation, on our personal careers, our daily life, things we liked by the beginning of 2020, and now we realize we can't do this anymore, or we have to do it in a different way. So these huge parties are a problem for the transmission. And a lot of rules and regulations by our political superiors who say, okay, we have 25% maximum occupancy. It's really hard to deal with. So I went to my favorite beer garden, there were 26 people, they didn't give me a beer. It was hard, but I can understand it. And I think these are things which every single person, if we stick to the rules, and then we can get through this together, because we know there will be a vaccine at some point in time, and it's going to help everything to get back to, I don't think that the term normal exists anymore, so it will get us back to something which is better than we are right now. So this is my take-home message. Wear a mask, stay away from really big gatherings. And this hand sanitation is actually important, because a regular person touches his face, I think, 7 or 9 times a minute. Right? So when you look at time-lapse videos, now we have got a little better because everybody keeps telling us, but whenever you have this infectious particle on your hands and you use soap, you're going to kill it, because coronavirus is actually a virus which has a hull, and you can dissolve this hull by simple soap. So washing your hands with soap really kills this virus. So this virus is not made out of steel, right? It's actually wimpy when you think about it. It only lives 2 hours on the surface, half-life, and soap kills it. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and this is kind of my take-home message. And I'm happy to answer the questions if you have some.
Thank you so much, Florian. We are open for questions. You can either type them in the general chat or unmute yourself and ask the question right away. Okay, we have one question: wearing eyeglasses. Let me see.
Yeah. So wearing eyeglasses or sunglasses, assuming you can minimize catching infections through eyes, this is actually true. A face shield is better. So if you are really in close proximity, you want a shield because it protects your whole face. But let's say a person coughs and you are just happen to stand in the line of fire and droplets fly directly in your eyes. If you have a sunglass, you are actually better protected than if you do not have one. But if you have to be super close at work with somebody for an extended period of time, a face shield is just a better cover.
Thank you. Any further questions? Anything you have on your mind? Now is the time to do it. There is a question. How do you, for Marcus, so how do your recommendations apply to non-essential activities, let's say soccer? Well, that's very funny. Okay.
So this is a conflict of interest question, because I'm a scientist, but I'm also a father, right?
Yeah.
And I'm from Germany, so I love soccer. So actually a colleague of mine, he's a rugby player, and he got into contact with a positive person. Didn't know it. So the person was tested 2 days later positive. So they played rugby together, touched the same ball, shook hands, all the stuff you do. And he did not get positive. So you can't really social distance when you play soccer, right? And a lot of people say they can't wear a mask when you play soccer. But on the other hand, you need a little bit of life quality. So I also allowed my children to go to a summer camp, where they also have interactions with other children of their age outdoors. And so if you play soccer, you should not touch your face, right? In best case scenario, you will wear a mask, because there is screaming involved, so droplets will travel 10 or more feet when one person is infected. Taking the temperature, not going to play soccer if you feel sick. If you have a person at home who is in a very high risk group, you should maybe reconsider not doing it. So this is all the things which I think the CDC is right. So these are basically the recommendation the CDC gives. I know it's hard to be without soccer. So my son plays soccer 6 hours a day. And I have him, when he comes home, I have them undergo a quarantine protocol. So they come home not through the main door, where they touch all the handles. They come in through the garage. We have a bag downstairs where they dump all their clothes in. And then it goes straight in the washing machine. And then they go straight up to the bathroom, have a shower with all doors open so that they don't have to touch any doorknobs. We try to protect our family from our children, which is maybe the worst thing you can say as a father, by we don't share glasses, right? So if somebody of us takes a water bottle, you label it with your name. If you have dinner together, I do not finish my 8-year-old son's sandwich if he can't finish it. I throw it away. we do a lot of extra hand washing. So we try to do our best to stay ahead of this virus without losing everything which makes life quality. So as a 100% scientist, I should say maybe wait with soccer playing until we have a vaccine. But there is also a father side in me, so I allowed it to my son under the best circumstances possible. And if you have a sensitive person in your household, isolate the child from this person. Right? So no good night hug, no good night kiss, all these things. Separate room. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Florian. We have a few more questions. One comes from Dan Russell. He is asking, are there any studies or even confirmed cases about transmission during contact sports in particular?
Yeah, so not to my knowledge. I try to keep up with the literature, but there are hundreds of manuscripts every day, so I don't know of one. The only thing I know is of two experiences from my personal friends who got in contact, and they both did not get it.
Oh, okay. Another question from Christine is there truth that the virus can be passed to other animals, like household pets?
Yeah, so there are no good studies yet to say this, but they found it in a bunch of types of animals. And I am not 100% sure about this because it depends on the test. So we talked about this. You have a test which might be 100% specific for COVID-19, or you might have a test which also picks up the virus of other families of coronaviruses. Or if it was an antibody test, it might pick up immunity against another type of coronavirus. So let's take a dog running through the forest where you have bats flying around and pooping all over the floor. And the dog gets in contact with this. So I am not 100% sure whether COVID-19 can be transmitted directly to animals. So COVID-19 does not infect cells just simply easy. So when you coronavirus, so the name of coronavirus, it means crown. So it has so-called spike proteins on the surface. And these spike proteins have to bind to a very specific receptor. Okay? It's got the ACE2 receptor. And humans have this ACE2 receptor. That's why it gets us. And other animals also have this ACE2 receptor, but not the human version. So the human version is different than the dog version or the mouse version. So a problem that vaccine development takes so long is that we can't work with mice, right? So scientists usually work with mice. They're easy to handle. You can get a lot of them, and you can learn a lot from these little animals because their immune system is actually very similar to ours. But I cannot infect mice with COVID-19, even though they have the receptor. But it needs, for COVID-19, it needs to be the human receptor. So I don't know whether there is a scientific answer to this question. It might be that you can infect animals, but only if they have the perfect match for the human ACE2 receptor. So I would.
Okay, thank you. We have two more questions on the board. One comes from Michael. Does passing a soccer ball with your feet to teammates in practice pose any risk, assuming social distancing?
Yeah. So the soccer ball lies on the ground. Whenever you speak, you have droplets coming out of your mouth. They will touch. They will fly to the ground. They will touch. They will end up on the soccer ball if you have a positive player. So, and then you shoot this ball with infectious particles to another person. So if you only do this with your feet, the risk of infection is super minimal. right? So I can't say that there is no risk in this. It's just super minimal. So I'm much more concerned about the handshaking before a football game, or if you go to a shower later, or in the changing room with a bunch of people in a closed, non-ventilated space, than passing a soccer ball. So I think you're good passing a soccer ball.
Okay, thank you. So the last one we have for now is from Brian. Is COVID-19 more contagious or deadly than influenza A or B?
I would say yes. So a lot of people die from influenza, and it's hard to tell, because there is a lot of people immune against influenza, right? So we have some kind of herd immunity because a lot of people get their flu shot, and even if you didn't get your flu shot, you might have seen this virus 10 times, right? Last season you were sick from influenza, so you build up immunity which lasts until the next year. So next year you get actually in contact with influenza, but you don't get sick. So all the numbers which you can read here and there, how many people die a year from influenza, how many people died by now from COVID, I think they are really hard to interpret. So I think that COVID is more serious because of the fact that you didn't get it last year, you didn't get it 2 years ago, so nobody has immunity. So that's what makes it so dangerous and so unpredictable. Because what we still don't understand is why the symptoms and actually the course of infection is so different in people. So it might be the blood type. There are good data that it has to do with the blood type. There are a lot of socioeconomic discrepancies. So people from lower income areas are more likely to suffer more for a couple of reasons, right? So they might be of a lower income family, so they might not go to the doctor that regularly. They might have preconditions. So nutrition is also a big thing. So there's a lot of research now going on in linking the severity of actually the disease to factors like obesity. And obesity is a big problem, especially in the United States. And people who have too much weight are likely to develop heart conditions. And the heart is also an organ which is attacked by this disease. So it seems like there are so many factors which are not fully understood yet, but by the death rate this virus has so far, I would consider it more dangerous.
All right, thank you. There is, let's see, a few more questions coming in. What about, from Colby, what about the inherent aspects of soccer, such as throwing a ball in? I'm assume this poses a problem.
Throwing the ball?
Throwing the ball like a throw-in. So if a player touches a ball to do a throw-in.
So if you have no injury on your hand and you have the COVID-19 infectious particle on your hand, you are very, very likely not get infected from this. The problem is that you cannot touch a mucosal surface area. So if you throw a ball, you have to treat your hands like they are contaminated, right? So sanitize them as soon as possible. Give your soccer players a hand sanitizer in their pocket. Don't touch your mouth, don't touch your nose, don't touch your eyes, right? So it's like when you go shopping and you touch something you don't know who touched this before. You just don't touch any mucosal surface and get your hands sanitized as soon as you can. You will not get sick by touching a soccer ball if you do not have an injury on your hand, and sanitize your hand later on without touching your face.
Thank you. So taking is from Mark. What are the biggest measures we can take during our soccer games to ensure we minimize spread of the virus?
Spread out.
Spread. Yep.
It's distancing. So if you can wear masks, that's helpful. That's the best thing you can do. Things you might if your players are further away from each other, the more distance you have between them, the better it is. But it's also like split them in groups when they go changing, right? Don't have all the guys or girls in the changing unit at once, right? So the fewer people you have in an enclosed area at the same time, the better it is. Or make them change at home. Close your changing unit. Tell them to wash their stuff when they get home. Make them disinfect their hands regularly during training. Teach them not to touch the face. So who touches the face costs $1 or a minus telly. Find something funny to do with them, right? Face touching. I do this with my kids too. If you touch your face, you put $1 in a box, or it's your job to do any kind of chores. Something like this they don't like. So every time face touching gives you a minus. It's things like this. It's actually straightforward and easy to do. And the biggest thing is not touching your face, wearing a mask if you can, and stay away as far as possible from others. If you feel that you got into contact with a person, let the others know. Get a test. Stay home if you're not sure. Right? So I had a person who got in contact with a person and was waiting for his test, didn't get the test. So we said, stay home, don't come in. So you have two responsibilities in this thing. So one is to protect yourself, and maybe the bigger one is to protect the others.
All right, Florian. Thank you so very much for your time tonight. It was absolutely fantastic. I think we all learned a lot, and we will take this to heart. So for everybody, this concludes our town hall for tonight. We will get you out a list of the next town hall meetings. So please stay well, stay safe, and thank you very much for participating tonight. Good night, everyone.
Bye.